Welcome to the East Bay's best podcast, The Capstone Conversation. This is a show that interviews political, government, and community leaders in Alameda, Contra Costa, and Solano counties. We look at what is going on in your city, how are we developing things economically, and where are we going from here? I'm your host, Jared Ash. Welcome to today's episode of the Capstone Conversation. I'm your host, Jared Ash, and today we are headed to East County of Contra Costa with Mayor Joel Bryant from Brentwood. Welcome, Mayor.
Good morning. Thanks, Jared. It's good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, and I am fascinated. You have a very interesting background, so I'm going to encourage you to talk about a longer answer than most of my guests, and tell us about how you arrived at being a mayor. You've been a small business owner. You are a member of the faith community and a leader in that, as well as the civic community. You've owned a photography business as well. You've been a head of a chamber of commerce, I believe. So just share a little bit about your background, because I find it very unique for most politicians.
Well, my background, I come from a biracial home. My father was Cherokee and my mother was Jewish. I was raised in Oklahoma on a ranch. So very interesting community for that kind of a combination of genetics, two different tribes coming together. And so my father, in addition to ranching, my father was a builder. My mother worked both in the aerospace industry with McDonnell Douglas, and later in life, she was a member of the staff of a senator. And so from Oklahoma. So it was really interesting. After I went to college, I had opportunity to travel a lot in different countries. I'm a musician. That helped. I did a couple of other things in the fashion industry, and that helped to experience different cultures, meet a lot of people. Early on, I had an opportunity. I worked for a company that provided international protection for people that were traveling in dangerous parts of the world. And I got to be on a team that basically escorted them into dangerous areas, made sure that they were okay, got to work with a lot of military. I was never in any of the arms branch of the services, but I did get to work as a contractor with a lot of them. And then came back to the States, got married. We lived in Annapolis, Maryland for many years, and got to work in the DC area, which really was the impetus for my interest in how politics affect people, not necessarily the politicians, excuse me, but how it affects us all. Being raised in the home of two individuals that come from minorities that have experienced tremendous devastation and culture shifts, generational culture shifts because of the governments that they were under at the time. Our conversations around our dinner table were probably not the norm. I wasn't aware of that growing up. I thought everybody had conversations of what you believe and why, and then got to take the opposing view and defend it staunchly. and it was just a lot of fun. It allowed us to really try to get an understanding of what decisions at the highest levels in government, what the trickle-down effect is, all the way down to every family in the country. And so that's kind of what got me started in interest in politics. And so we moved to California. I work for a religious organization, and I am a pastor. And so a lot of my focus has been on just helping people. We moved to Los Angeles area. We lived in Long Beach for 5 years, and I got to work as one of the directors for a mission in Long Beach, the Lighthouse Mission in Long Beach. So I got a baptism by fire, so to speak, on homeless issues, the actual hands-on homeless issues, problems, concerns. that the state of California has that are a little bit different than a lot of the other states because of some of the policies that have been in place, because of some of the policies that were put in place in the 80s that got rid of a lot of mental health resources. So so I got to do that. Then we moved up to the Bay Area, moved to Brentwood in 2001. And it's really interesting because I've had opportunity to live in very high tech and tech centric areas of the country and very agricultural parts of the country. And Brentwood really combines both of that, almost bisects the community 50-50 in what those different areas of focus are. And so it's really been a great experience.
So let's talk about Brentwood as a location. Most people know it as a Upick Capital. They come in from San Francisco and Silicon Valley for that. I go every year, probably twice to Brentwood with my kids, once to do the Halloween pumpkin patch at Smith's Farms. So shout out to Mr. Smith and do that. And then we come out for strawberry / peach and cherry picking, depending on when we actually can make it. So talk about that. And then let's pivot into Brentwood as a tech workforce.
Well, the agricultural UPIC component is really significant. There are in excess of 500,000 people a year that come out for that very short period of time, depending on what it is that they're wanting to pick. This year, we were officially designated as the Upick Capital of the world. After the research was done, Brentwood has the highest per capita Upick farms and agricultural sources in the world. So that's kind of neat. But this area has been agricultural for many generations. In the ag community, historically, it's a concern that as generations grow in this country, one of the best things about the United States of America is the opportunity. And so the families that came and moved to Brentwood many decades ago, 50 years ago, 200 years ago, from other countries, many of them were farmers, not highly educated, didn't have a lot of degrees. But as the generations go on, the focus for education in families and in our country has been significant. So their families, their kids would grow up, go to college, and many of them would not want to stay in the agricultural industry. And so probably starting about 40, 50 years ago now, the technological advancements and the scientific advancements in agriculture, in farming and growth, in supply, became interesting enough, challenging enough, and profitable enough that they were able to use degrees that they received to come back into the community and start focusing on agriculture, small plot agriculture. There has been the ability, because of the science involved, to take a 20-acre plot of land, and the yield from that piece of land over the last 20 years has gone up over 200%. So that's really been significant. Plus, you've got vertical farming, you've got the hydroponic farming, all of these different technologies that are now available, which led into other industries like farm to fork restaurant supply, focusing on specific types of product. Brentwood is very well known worldwide for our corn. I have friends in New York that call me regularly at certain times of year. I'm not sure how our growers do it, but they get it out to New York and up into the Catskills. I even had somebody from Paris call a few years ago and say, "Hey, we just came to Paris. We're out here and came across Brentwood corn." So it's really fascinating what the agricultural dynamics in the world are now. And that's been really something because the city of Brentwood has worked diligently and partnered with our ag families here in our ag core to protect perpetually a lot of this agricultural land. So we partnered with some different federal grants, state grants, and private and public partnerships to protect a lot of these acres out here so that they will be perpetually agricultural. And that's really brought a lot of buy-in from the ag families. And there seems to have been a real shift in the last 20 years in the Bay Area for a lot of the families that live from Brentwood. We call it over the hill. Once you get over into the 680 corridor, a lot of the families, when they find the opportunity, they have gotten to the point in their life and in their life experience that they want a little more room, a little more of a laid back, less pressure on a daily basis in front of their living space. And so they'll move out to East Contra Costa County, see that there's a lifestyle that's much more designed for community involvement, individual resources. Brentwood has over 100 parks that we really have focused on design, very family centric. We've got great schools. We've got a great public safety. And so they move out here when they've wanted to start a family or bring their young families out here and have access to a part of the American life experience that a lot of people in the cities don't have easy access to. If you live in the city of Brentwood, you can be in San Francisco, San Jose, Sacramento, Oakland, all based upon traffic, all within 50 minutes to an hour. You can be up into Lake Tahoe in 2.5, 3 hours, depending on traffic. It's a great location. The families that live here really, one of the most exciting things to me is it has become significantly more culturally integrated than it has been before. We have many cultures that weren't here 23 years ago when my family moved here. And we've partnered as a city to have these events become a part of our local customs and our local traditions. And the community as a whole has so totally embraced it that we're having to really focus on planning these different events, different holidays, different cultures, to give everyone enough time, enough space, enough room to effectively do it and allow our community to participate. It's been really great.
So let me pick up on something you said. That was a great description of Brentwood and the community and the types of people. You talk about 500,000 people a year coming in for the Upick particularly. That's about 9 times your population. What's the economic impact to the city as a result of that?
It's really hard to measure the total economic impact. It really is significant. There are rarely, when it comes to emergency response resource burden, there's very little of that. The communities come in, the people come in. There's rarely any issues there. Traffic is significant, but the agricultural families, the farms, the Upick locations have been doing it so long that it's pretty much a well-oiled machine as much as possible. All of the restaurants in town have a significant boost. The shopping downtown and other areas, we have a shopping location, an outdoor type mall, similar to the block in Orange County in Southern California. And they're impacted. It's just really fantastic the way that our local businesses are lifted up by the outside dollars that come in, which is really great because in a smaller community, the city of Brentwood has about 65,000 people. And if you bring dollars into this community and you spend them locally, those dollars circulate locally about 70% more locally than they do in larger cities, where you go in and spend that money, and that money often goes outside of the city limits once it's spent. In small communities, that's not the case. And so any outside money that comes in and is spent, that money stays in circulation Our small businesses support each other. Our residents shop small, shop local often. And so it's just really a tremendous benefit.
One of the things I do is I run some business improvement districts and in the area, and we often talk about link trips. And you actually describe that when people come out there, then you're not only doing the Upick, but you stop for lunch. You stop even for an ice cream cone or a cup of coffee. You shop. That's spending local. And that's really what enhances the community. So it's that focus on link trips.
Absolutely. And one of the additional benefits of being in a less pressure environment, like a community like Brentwood, is that people interact with each other. Strangers start up conversations because they're in a really good mental and emotional space where they're willing to happily talk. They feel safe. They see other people enjoying themselves. They start up conversations. And it's not unusual for people to develop significant friendships and come out more often for different events because we do have some fantastic places to eat. We've got some great wineries and event centers, a lot of functions going on all the time. And I have a lot of people that I've met that I'll call when there's an event going on I know they're interested in, that I met because they came out here to do Upick or go to one of the wineries, and we struck up a friendship. It's pretty neat.
That's great. So let's bring in a connection to ag and innovation. You guys are building an agriculture innovation center out there that the city's been taking the lead on. Talk a little bit about what's going on there.
Well, the city purchased, I believe in the 90s, the city purchased a piece of property that is in the agricultural core. The city of Brentwood, the city limits, the road on the eastern side of town that is the boundary of the city limits is called Sellers Avenue. And on the other side of Sellers Avenue is the agricultural core that the county has set the overlay on that will be agriculture and can only be used for agricultural enterprise. And so the city owned this piece of property that was directly contiguous to the East Contra Costa Historical Society, which has focused on the agricultural history and the roots of this community and this area. And so when I first got on council in 2010, something that was really interesting to me was what we could potentially do with that 11 acres of property that had to be used for agricultural purposes of some sort. And the city of Brentwood doesn't do agriculture in and of itself as a city. And so we began to have conversations with the growers, the agricultural families, and the historical society as to what interest they might have. The city of Brentwood has the oldest FHA, FA, and 4-H groups in the state, and one of the last 4-H groups in the state. And we have a group of the agricultural families have a nonprofit that they've put together and a for-profit corporation that they've joined together in. And they said, hey, we would like to have an innovation center, a place that we can have permanently. It will be a training center. It'll be an education center. It'll be a location that our local families that want to have a community garden can have. It'll be a place that all of our agricultural school programs can be a part of. And they said, we want to partner with the city and we want to run it and do it. And so they brought forth a program and a game plan that was just absolutely phenomenal, that will accomplish all of that. And it will also be a location that can be a destination location for people coming out to Upick. They can spend a day there, potentially eat some meals there, see how things are grown, harvest some things themselves, just a lot of the things that are agriculture in focus. And that was something that we got to partner with. We're in the process of doing it now and couldn't be more excited about it. That's really going to be beneficial, a place for our different farms and growing families to have some of their products there, introduce a doorway, so to speak. So some of the products that we make here and that they make, visitors can go there and then be drawn into their local farm or orchard.
And when tentatively will that be open?
That date hasn't arrived yet to tentative date, but we are in the beginning steps of it. I would anticipate certainly within the next year and a half, it will be open and running, I would expect.
We're talking cherry season of 2025. All right. That'll be your goal now. Cherry Upick season. All right. Let's expand on that. We talked about innovation in agriculture and displaying that, bringing in the farm. You talked earlier about tech workers and an educated workforce that are traveling to 680 over to Silicon Valley, over to Livermore. But you guys have a desire in Brentwood to build your own tech center to sort of captivate some of those workers that already live in your community. Talk to us about the tech center, the good, the bad, what's going right, what's happening.
Well, we have named it the Innovation Center. It is designed to be a transportation hub, a place where a lot of the families, in doing the research, talking to real estate agents, talking to our families out here, talking to my kids who are in their 30s and in some of those industries, finding out what they want and what some of the things that I'll hit the residential component of this first that I received an education on is that there is a significant portion of our population that doesn't really have the goal in mind of having a house with a lawn, and they want a lifestyle experience that if they want to, they can come home, lock their door, and fly off to any point in the world and experience. Instead of buying things, they want to buy experiences and memories. And so they want to go to different parts of the world, spend the same amount of money, then come back home and turn the key, and their living space has been maintained. It's so this is designed to bring that component in, bring housing in for people that are in the tech industries that prefer that type of housing. And they will have, basically, it's a small biosphere type environment that you work there in the tech industries and you live there. There's a lot of open green space. Public transportation will be coming right down the middle of Highway 4 there until the potential for BART to come out here, should that continue to be a potential. It is planned. There are other technologies that we are partnering with to get the residents to the BART station in Antioch, which is, I think it's about 4 miles from where we are here. And so it's designed to be a place that attracts very high-paying jobs in the tech industry, in the medical tech industry, in the sciences, and so that they can work here, live here. Worst case scenario, have a reverse commute against the traffic flow into Brentwood. It's designed to employ, depending upon what industry comes out here, from 400 to 1,200 people in that location. In East Contra Costa County, in Brentwood, and in the East County area, we can provide and do provide workforce for any kind of corporation, any kind of tech. Many of our residents work in Livermore at the Lawrence Livermore Labs, like you were saying, in Silicon Valley. And so preventing the necessity for that travel, or providing a hub location for corporations and industries that have large facilities, but also much of their workforce has to endure a 2 to 4 hour torture process in traffic every day. So being able to provide a change of quality of life for someone so that they don't have to be in that traffic 5 days a week. Maybe they can work here 3 days, 4 days a week, and if necessary, some jobs essentially, depending on what kind of industry, you have to be there maybe once a week. And that will address a lot of the larger issues, the greenhouse gas emission, the traffic issues, the quality of life issues. We do have some businesses and industries that have moved into this area that our local residents were able to transfer here for those businesses or get hired on. And the difference in their quality of life, they've got their kids in local schools on local sports teams, which is also a very significant component of our families here. And to be able to take an hour or two during your week and be at your child's event, it brings stronger families, stronger community. Having a 10-minute commute will do so much more than just save you fuel and wear and tear and frustration. It also gives you time with your family. I'm often asked, what's wrong with our society? Give me the top 3 things. Well, one of the top things is our families don't have opportunity to spend time with each other. Everyone's so busy of necessity trying to survive and earn wages that will allow our families to survive, that when the average parents in a lot of the recent polling, when they answered honestly, the average parent-child interaction in a home, significant one-on-one, non-interrupted interaction with the social media turned off and you're sitting there having a conversation, is less than 4 hours a week in the home. And so when you have an opportunity to build personal value in your family members and your neighbors, that you can spend time with them and let them know they're appreciated, they're valued, their input is valued, they as an individual are valued and cared for, that's going to change society. That's going to change dramatically the mental health concerns that we're struggling with as a state and a nation and a world. That's going to really change our issues when it comes to both crime and just bored individuals trying to entertain themselves and getting into trouble like most of us did in our generation before there was social media, thankfully, a lot of times. And so all of these things go back to the Innovation Center being not only a resource for economic development, but also a resource for families, a resource for the environment. And so that was something that all of those are very high priorities in our community. And so that the city of Brentwood really focused on that, and we're excited about it.
There's a couple things of note in there. One, you have to like your family to want to spend more time.
That's true.
So that we can't help, right? But we can at least try to create an environment for them. But I also picked up on there, I have 3 daughters, 9, 6, and 4, and we're recording this episode a week before Christmas or less, and it'll air in January. But my wife and I have been talking about how to give our girls experiences as part of the holiday season versus just gifts that they can open. And so on our radar screen is the Museum of Ice Cream in San Francisco, Six Flags in Vallejo, the Academy of Sciences, the Oakland Zoo, all places we've been, but really try to make it more memorable or tie in a gift to that. So if we're going to the zoo, we tie in a puzzle on animals to it and separate out memories as part of that. And we're also going to Florida to visit family. And we really want to encourage them for science and math. So Kennedy Space Center is on our agenda, and we're just excited about that. And you tying in gifts or experiences and memories to that you talked about, and that ability to travel is so. As Brentwood is expanding, we've talked a little bit about it, but a lot of your counterparts from all over the Bay Area who've been on here have talked about RHNA numbers and housing. And how does Brentwood find that balance in keeping those farms that you've talked about that have been there for 100+ years and expanding the housing?
Well, that is the difficult question. Some of the concerns that I have, and that every mayor in Contra Costa has expressed at some point, but not just the mayors, the entire communities. There's a problem that it seems to be diametrically opposed to itself. and that is the need for housing versus the ability to provide housing. Cities don't build houses, developers do. And yet, there have been several laws that have been put in place over the last 5 6 years, especially, that have significantly reduced a local city's ability, the local government in a city, in a community, in a township, to determine what the housing and the buildings look like. This California, especially the Bay Area, is so diverse that there is not a one-size-fit-all solution. And one of the things that, and I've talked to a lot of our electeds in Sacramento that agree with the thought that high density housing and very high density housing is best supported in the urban environment, where there is easy access to local transit, and a lot of the jobs are right there, with sometimes within just a few blocks of the high density housing by design. And that makes a lot of sense in that structure. But when you come out to an area that is not high density, that was for many generations designed for the white picket fence and 2 cars in the garage and a dog and a cat and 2.5 children, and trying to find a way to bring higher densities, a different product that's available, but also affordable housing, accessible housing. And by affordable housing, I don't necessarily mean the legal definition, the state definition of what affordable housing is per income, but also being able to have a product that the average person that isn't making $250,000 a year when they get out of college or whatever vocation that they have, they can afford to buy a home and live in a community that they were raised in. And that's a real challenge that we're having with these RHNA numbers, is both how do we get them to be addressed effectively, beneficially, because in any city, if they made the right, with the right developer, anyone can cram high density housing somewhere, and it's over in that corner of the community. And eventually, historically, a lot of that type of building ends up in 40 years or less to be a source of blight, of concern, of a lot of burden on your public safety resources. Just simply because if you put a lot of people together very closely, that by its very design causes a lot of stress on people. And so because of that, we don't want that kind of design. We have taken very intentional efforts in the city of Brentwood to integrate our different levels of housing design into each community, so that you can't drive into the city of Brentwood and see, okay, that's a part of Brentwood you don't want to live in. This is a part that's designed differently for higher incomes. We don't want that. We have intentionally integrated our housing so that our families can live together and have a great quality of life and personal individual pride, whether they own the house, whether they are leasing or renting the house. Everyone, one of the things, and this really is, and I try not to get too preachy on this, but I believe in the principles of the Constitution of the United States. And I believe that the goal is to live and apply all men are created equal. All humans are created equal. And in order to do that, you have to treat them equally, and you have to provide equally for them. And so this idea of answering the RHNA numbers by just doing a project, a development that answers the numbers but ignores the life needs and the individual needs of the people, I'm totally against that process and that thought process. And so how do we balance the necessity for these much higher numbers? The city of Brentwood does have available land. East County does have. We are the pressure relief valve for the Bay Area when it comes to growth. If you will look over the last 25 years, all growth is coming this direction, both commercially, industrially, and residentially, because that's where the land is. And so people have lived here, been raised here, and moved here because of the quality of life. So how do we balance these RENA numbers with the quality of life that we want to maintain and the identity of community that we want to maintain? And so it's been very difficult. One of the things that I try to do is anytime I'm approached by a developer that's talking housing, I want them to understand that it's very important for me as a community representative that our families that have deep roots, generations in their families, many of our families all went to the same high school. Sometimes for 6 generations, they've gone to Liberty High School here in Brentwood, one of the oldest high schools in the state. And they're very, very proud of that. And so they want their kids to graduate from Brentwood High School, Liberty High School, and they want them to want to be able to come back after they go off and get educated or go off and get a career or vocation and be able to live here in Brentwood. But the median price of a house here in Brentwood is at one point, it may be higher than this now, but at one point was $680,000 this year. A person coming out of college rarely can qualify, especially with the rising interest rates, to live in the community they were raised in. And again, we go back to the family experience and the individual experience. Having deep roots and long-term family commitments into a community provides ownership from those families and individuals into that community. They don't say, I'm not doing this because it's against the law. They're saying, I am doing it or not doing it because this is my community and I value it and I value the people in it. And so we want a financially accessible product. Now, does that mean that there are going to have to be some different designs available than the single family house on the quarter acre? Yes, it does. But there are designs that are successful around the country that have addressed this concern successfully. And that's something that I want to deal with. I want to attract, yes, does it mean it's going to have to be a project or development that has much higher value homes in order to cover the costs so that the development will pencil out to provide these less expensive homes? Talking to the developers, it's just a simple fact. It costs them just as much to build a home that they sell for $400,000 as it does to build a home that they sell for $1 million because of the economy of scale when it comes to the building materials and the workforce. So why would a developer say to a city or a council, sure, I will build a product that I can only sell for half the price in a market that is sold at 20% above asking price as soon as we cut the ribbon and say it's on the market? Why would I do that? And that's a good question. Why, as a city and why, as a council, why would we expect a developer who is a business and they're in it to make money to come in and say, I will cut my profits by half simply to appease what you want and to meet these numbers for you? Very good question. And that's the one we're trying to find a good answer for.
Yeah. Well, and for everybody else who's living in La Miranda or in San Francisco and wondering where they can afford affordable housing, depends on what you mean. $650,000 in Brentwood for the median house is a very nice, sometimes brand new house, much different than other areas of the Bay. And that's a unique characteristic. So I want to talk sort of one final area. We talked a little bit about what's happening in Sacramento on taxes earlier. And how does that impact the local economy, particularly here in the Bay Area?
Well, it is no secret that the state of California, at one point, not too distant past, was the reason they called it the Golden State, other than the gold rush, was through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We were the gold standard for how you attract corporations, businesses, and technology. And over the last 10 years, there have been some very public exiting of a lot of our businesses that were cornerstones, that were both attracting other similar type investment from corporations, international corporations and national, as well as local. And the trend has reversed significantly. In the last 3 years, there have been several very important corporations and industries that have exited. And I've spoken to a lot of the businesses, local businesses that have left, and corporate representatives from some of the larger ones in the state, and asked what was the reason why. There's one international, very well-known historic business that the CEO lived here in Brentwood. And a few years ago, they were making a decision as to where they were going to expand. It's an East Coast-based company. They were coming to the West Coast. They wanted to be here in the Bay Area. He lived in Brentwood, and he was looking for a location for 2 years that would satisfy their needs as far as production, as far as shipping. And physically, the Bay Area checked all the boxes. As a matter of fact, the East Bay checked all the boxes. But then the benefit of leaving the state to start their branch on the West Coast was all tax centered, all revenue tax centered. And so I talked to him. His first name was Randy. I said, Randy, is there anything I can do, or is there anyone I can introduce you to at a state level or in a business level a city level, that we could help bring some benefits to you, some things that would help you consider that? And he said, no, the deficit between the bottom line, staying in the state and leaving it, is more than 40%. And that was the first that I'd heard that it was that far in certain industries. And so having tax incentives is nice. Having tax incentives that show corporations that are here and potentially businesses and technologies and corporations that might be looking to move here, that we are business friendly, that we want your business and we will support your decisions. Those are things that are absolutely essential if we're going to turn the trend around. And the decisions that we've been receiving and the laws that we have been receiving and living with for the last 10 years have sent the very opposite message. And when one of the most recent things that I read when it comes to trends of people moving in or out of the state was the U-Haul report, that 80% of the U-Haul's business is leaving the state for the first time ever. And I have relatives and friends around the world and in the United States that ask me regularly, how can I stay living in the state that has one of the highest taxes, some of the highest property costs, some of the highest or the highest homeless issues, the highest drug and mental health issues in the latest reports? How can I stay here? Well, a lot of those people have never been here. Geographically, there isn't, and I've lived in many places around the world and in the United States. Geographically, California is still the gold standard. It is the most beautiful place with the widest availability of experiences. It's the most beautiful place in the country and one of the most beautiful places in the world. There's a reason why, in spite of all the negatives that I just went over, that so many people, this is a bucket list place to visit in their life on a vacation or to live. And you're not going to change that. So my focus, I think we really need to start focusing on how can we make the quality of life for our residents such that we can afford to live here. Our kids can afford to live here. They want to come and go to school here. our state college program is still, the process is still the best in the country by far. And yet we're losing some of our top academic achievers to go. We have Stanford. we, we have all of these places, and yet more and more of our families and kids that are growing, and I say kids because I'm now the old guy, but our families are leaving the state and going other places. That wasn't the case before. So I think we have to be honest about why it wasn't the case before, why it seems to be trending that way now, and what can we do about it to reverse it. And we're going to have to make those decisions at the local level as well as the state level.
You make some good points, and I think those should be discussions. Maybe I'll try to get the head of GoBiz, the governor's office of business and improvement in the state, in here for an episode, and I think we can have a conversation and challenge them on what are they doing to attract these businesses and keep them here as well. Because, like you mentioned, there's a lot that have gone on and left the state. And I get that question a lot when I do national conference calls where people will be like, well, your state's on fire. Why do you want to live there? Or aren't you out of water? How does everybody have enough to drink? And they laugh when I say, well, there's always vodka. But those are real concerns. But then I point out that they live in Minnesota in January or Phoenix and Dallas in July, and they complain about the weather. And they complain about other significant issues there. Hurricanes and property taxes that are out of control, the inability to get homeowners insurance. So California really does offer a lot, from hiking and biking to the beautiful scenery to we are still the innovation capital of the world in the Bay Area.
Absolutely. One of the speakers at our recent Contra Costa Mayors Conference, we have this conference every month that all of the mayors are available to get together and go over what's going on in our communities, what's trending in the state, in the country, in the nation. One of the speakers, when they were talking about some of the industries, spoke and said something very keynote to me, and that was that as a state, we're going to have to make it a race to the top of innovation and not the bottom. We cannot compete with the states that are remove some of the essential regulations to keep the environment safe and to keep productivity up. We don't want that, and we'll never be able to compete with how low can you go and how low can you lower the bar. But we can make it a race to the top. If you want innovation, if you want industry, if you want science, if you want tech, we are the heart of that innovation in the world. And how do we support that? One of the things that is a great concern is the recent loss of the jobs in the tech industry in Silicon Valley. Most of the people that work those jobs live in our communities, in our smaller communities. And you can't easily pivot from that kind of industry to just some other kind of industry. Fortunately, some of that job force and workforce is able to work remotely because that it is a tech type of job. Some of those jobs you can live anywhere in the world and work there, but not all. And what do we do with our families now that have heavily invested and in the roots of our communities and bought homes, and now they are struggling significantly? And I've talked to some in our city that are very concerned because now they have been given a very short period of time to apply for limited positions that everyone in the industry is now applying for.
They're applying for it nationally. So you're competing for what once was a San Francisco-based job with somebody who might live in Alabama. And they could take a lot lower of a wage for their cost of living than we do here. But we could talk for another hour on that. Sure. So I really appreciate that, Mr. Mayor Joel Bryant from Brentwood. We got to learn a lot about East County and Brentwood and just talk about topics that I think are in a lot of our minds in the Bay Area of where we are going from here. So I really appreciate your time today.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. I really enjoy watching these interviews that you provide. I learn a lot from a lot of different perspectives. One of the greatest things that happened to me when I got to move to California was I had access to so many different perspectives that it just it's fantastic to be able to see the world through somebody else's eyes in so many different ways. And there aren't very many opportunities everywhere that you can get provided that like you can in this state, in our communities. And so it's been great.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Please hit subscribe so you get the weekly updates of when we release the next episode. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Capstone Government Affairs and Economic Development, a firm where I serve as managing partner. For more information, check us out at www.capstonegov.com and follow us on LinkedIn by typing in Capstone Government. Check out the show notes, and for a full transcript, visit our website, www.capstonegov.com, and follow us on LinkedIn by typing in Capstone Government, or you can find me, your host, Jared Ash.